Ladies and gentlemen, there's something terrifying about stepping into the unknown. That feeling of standing at the edge, looking forward and thinking, what if I fail? What if I don't have what it takes? But here's the thing, faith isn't about certainty. Faith is about stepping anyway. Trusting that God isn't just sending you forward, he's walking with you. There's something unsettling about uncertainty. It's that space between where you are and where you want to be, the unknown, the in-between, the gap that faith requires you to step into. And let's be honest, we don't like it. We like plans, guarantees, and clear paths. We want to know that if we take a step, the ground beneath us won't crumble. But that's not how faith works. Faith asks us to move before we see. It asks us to trust before we understand. And that's hard because we're wired to seek certainty. We want to predict outcomes, calculate risks, and minimize failure. We want to know that we're making the right decisions, that we're headed in the right direction. But God doesn't hand us a detailed roadmap. He gives us a compass, one that points forward and says, trust me. And that's uncomfortable because trust requires surrender. It requires stepping into places that don't always make sense. It requires believing in something bigger than our fears. And most of us, we struggle with that. We struggle because we've been taught to equate control with security. We think if we can just figure everything out, then we'll be okay. If we can predict the future, then we can protect ourselves from pain. But here's the truth, control is an illusion. Life doesn't come with guarantees, and no amount of planning can prevent every storm. But faith. Faith allows us to walk through uncertainty without being consumed by it. Faith is knowing that even when the path isn't clear, God is still leading. Even when we don't understand, he is still working. Think about the moments in your life when you've been forced to step into the unknown. Maybe it was a career shift, a relationship change, a move to a new city, or a dream that felt too big to chase. That feeling, the racing heart, the doubt, the what ifs, that's the tension of uncertainty. And that's where faith comes alive. Because if we only moved when we were sure, we wouldn't need faith. Look at the stories of people who did extraordinary things. They didn't wait for perfect conditions. They didn't wait until they had all the answers. They moved in faith despite the uncertainty. They stepped out, even when the odds were stacked against them. Abraham was told to leave his home without knowing where he was going. Moses was called to lead people through a wilderness with no clear destination in sight. Esther had to risk everything to step into her purpose. None of them had certainty. None of them had guarantees. But they had faith. And that was enough. Maybe right now you're standing in a season of uncertainty. Maybe you're waiting for clarity, for a sign, for some assurance that if you step forward, it'll all work out. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe you're waiting for certainty when God is asking for faith. Because faith doesn't eliminate uncertainty, it carries us through it. Faith doesn't promise ease, it promises presence. And when we embrace that, when we stop demanding guarantees and start trusting that God is leading, we step into something far greater than comfort. We step into purpose. So what if the uncertainty you fear is actually the space where your faith is meant to grow? What if the unknown isn't a barrier, but an invitation? What if the thing you're hesitant to step into is the thing that will unlock the life you're meant to live? What if the only thing standing between you and what God has for you is trust? Comfort is easy. It's predictable, familiar, and safe. It keeps us in places we know, doing things we've mastered, surrounded by the same rhythms and routines. And let's be honest, comfort feels good. It gives us a sense of control, a sense of security. But the problem is comfort and growth rarely coexist. Courage, on the other hand, is uncomfortable. It asks us to step beyond what we know, to take risks, to face uncertainty. And most of the time, that's the last thing we want to do. We hesitate. We overthink. We wait for the perfect moment, the moment we feel ready, the moment we have more confidence, the moment the fear disappears. But that moment doesn't come. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward despite it. Too often, we convince ourselves that staying comfortable is the smarter choice. We tell ourselves that we're being practical, that we're avoiding unnecessary risks, that we'll step out later when the timing is better, when we feel stronger, when we have more certainty. But deep down, we know the truth, we're just afraid. And fear will keep us small if we let it. The thing about comfort is that it's deceptive, It makes us feel safe, but in reality, it keeps us stuck. It keeps us in jobs we've outgrown, relationships that no longer serve us, and versions of ourselves that no longer align with who we're becoming. Comfort whispers, stay where you are. It's fine here. Why rock the boat? But fine is not the same as fulfilled. And if we choose comfort over courage, we risk missing out on the life we were meant to live. Look at the people who have done incredible things. They didn't get there by staying comfortable. They got there by making hard choices, by taking risks, by pushing through fear. They stepped into the unknown, not because they were fearless, but because they chose courage over comfort. Courage looks different for everyone. Sometimes it's speaking up when it's easier to stay silent. Sometimes it's walking away from something that no longer serves you. Sometimes it's pursuing a dream that makes no logical sense but won't leave your heart alone. Sometimes it's setting a boundary, saying no, or showing up as your authentic self even when it feels vulnerable. And here's the truth, courage isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily choice. A choice to step forward when fear tells you to retreat. A choice to trust when uncertainty makes you hesitate. A choice to believe in what God has placed inside of you, even when doubt creeps in. The people who live with purpose, the ones who make an impact, the ones who inspire us, they don't have superhuman confidence. They just refuse to let fear have the final say. They understand that comfort might feel good in the moment, but it won't take them where they need to go. Growth requires discomfort. Transformation requires risk. Stepping into your purpose requires you to leave behind the safety of what you know and trust that something greater is ahead. Because the truth is, you were never called to a life of ease. You were called to a life of faith. And faith always requires courage. Fear is a master storyteller. It whispers worst-case scenarios in our minds, convincing us that if we step out of our comfort zones, everything will fall apart. It tells us that failure is inevitable, that rejection is too painful, that we aren't capable, that we aren't enough. And because we don't want to feel the weight of those fears, we cling to control. Control makes us feel safe. It gives us the illusion that if we plan enough, prepare enough, and predict enough, we can keep ourselves from experiencing pain. If we control our relationships, we won't get hurt. If we control our careers, we won't fail. If we control how people perceive us, we won't be rejected. But here's the problem, control is an illusion. It's a defense mechanism that keeps us from fully living. No matter how much we try to manage, plan, or strategize, life will always be unpredictable. There will always be things we can't control, other people's choices, unforeseen circumstances, moments that don't go according to plan. And the harder we hold on, the more exhausted we become. Letting go of fear and control doesn't mean being reckless. It doesn't mean we stop planning or making wise decisions. It means recognizing that our attempts to control everything are actually rooted in fear, not faith. It means surrendering the belief that our worth, success, or happiness depends on everything going exactly how we imagined. Think about the moments in your life when you've tried to control an outcome. Maybe you held on to a relationship long past its expiration date because you were afraid of what would happen if you let go. Maybe you obsessed over every detail of a project, not because you were passionate about excellence, but because you were terrified of failure. Maybe you hesitated to step into a new opportunity because you didn't know exactly how it would turn out. Control doesn't just keep us safe, it keeps us small. It keeps us from stepping into the unknown, from taking risks, from trusting that even if things don't go according to our plans, they are still unfolding exactly as they should. At its core, the need for control is really a lack of trust. When we refuse to release our grip, we are saying, I don't believe that things will work out unless I force them to. But faith doesn't work like that. Faith asks us to step forward even when we can't see the whole path. Faith asks us to trust that even if things don't go the way we expected, they are still working together for our good. Faith asks us to let go not because everything will be easy, but because we were never meant to carry the weight of trying to control it all. Fear thrives in the space between what we want and what we can't guarantee. But when we surrender our need for control, we stop living in constant anxiety about the future. We stop micromanaging every detail of our lives. We stop allowing fear to dictate our decisions. And instead, we step into a life where trust replaces tension, where faith replaces fear, where we release our grip and allow things to unfold as they are meant to. Because when we finally let go, we don't just release control, we make room for something greater. We all have a past, moments we regret, decisions we wish we could undo, words we wish we hadn't spoken, or maybe words we wish we had spoken but didn't. There are chapters of our stories that we would rather erase, memories that replay in our minds like a loop, reminding us of our failures, our mistakes, and the times we fell short. It's easy to believe that because we've been one way before, we are destined to stay that way forever. That because we've struggled, we'll always struggle. That because we failed, we'll always fail. That because we've been hurt, we'll always be broken. But that's not how life works, and it's certainly not how growth works. The past is a place of reference, not a place of residence. Yet so many of us live as though our past is a prison we can't escape. We let shame dictate our decisions. We allow old wounds to shape our self-worth. We replay the same painful stories in our heads, reinforcing the idea that who we were is all we'll ever be. But the truth is, your past is just one part of your story. It's not the whole story. It's not the final word. What happened before doesn't have to dictate what happens next. Think about the people in history who made an impact. The ones who overcame obstacles. The ones who defied the odds. The ones who refused to let their past determine their future. They didn't let their failures define them. They didn't allow their lowest moments to be the end of their story. They made a choice to move forward despite what had happened before. And that's what we're called to do. No matter what has happened in your life, whether it was something you did or something that was done to you, you are not bound by it. You are not trapped by your past mistakes, and you are not limited by your past experiences. Growth is always possible. Change is always possible. Redemption is always possible. But it requires a shift in mindset. It requires you to stop identifying yourself by your past struggles and start seeing yourself as someone who is capable of transformation. It requires you to stop believing that your past failures mean you're unworthy of a new beginning. It requires you to stop carrying the weight of shame and start stepping into the grace that allows you to begin again. We all have scars. We all have things we wish were different. But scars are not signs of weakness, they're evidence of healing. They're proof that you've survived, that you've learned, that you've grown. And growth is never wasted. The danger of living in the past is that it keeps you from fully stepping into the present. It keeps you from seeing the opportunities in front of you. It keeps you from believing that new beginnings are possible. But the moment you decide that your past does not have the authority to define your future, everything changes. You are allowed to outgrow old versions of yourself. You are allowed to change your mind, your path, your story. You are allowed to step forward without carrying the labels, the regrets, or the shame of what once was. Because no matter where you've been, you still get to decide where you're going. There is something exhausting about trying to be someone you're not. Wearing a mask, shaping yourself to fit expectations, constantly wondering if you're saying the right thing, doing the right thing, being the right thing. It's a heavy way to live. And yet so many of us do it because we think it's the only way to belong, the only way to be successful, the only way to be enough. But here's the truth, anything that requires you to be someone other than who you are is not meant for you. We live in a world that constantly pushes us toward imitation. It tells us to look at what's working for others and do the same. It pressures us to fit into molds that weren't designed for us. It rewards sameness, not authenticity. But purpose, true calling, is not found in being a copy of someone else. It's found in being fully, unapologetically yourself. Because the things that make you different, those are the things that make you valuable. The way you see the world, the way you think, the experiences that have shaped you, those are not accidents. They are clues. They are indicators of your purpose. They are the very things that set you apart and make you uniquely qualified for what you are called to do. But stepping into authenticity requires courage. It requires you to stop performing, to stop seeking validation from people who were never meant to approve of you, to stop molding yourself into a version of you that feels safe and acceptable but is ultimately untrue. It requires you to trust that who you are without the filters, without the pretense, without the carefully curated version is enough. The challenge is that authenticity is risky. It opens you up to criticism. It makes you vulnerable. It means some people won't understand you, won't agree with you, won't approve of you. And for most of us, that's terrifying. We crave acceptance. We want to be liked. But the truth is, the people who are meant to be part of your journey will be drawn to you because of your authenticity, not despite it. And the ones who don't accept it, they were never meant to be your people anyway. Think about the people who inspire you, the ones who have made an impact, the ones who have stepped into their calling in ways that feel undeniable. They didn't get there by pretending. They got there by embracing who they truly are, by leaning into the very things that make them unique. They didn't shrink themselves to fit a mold. They stepped into their purpose by showing up as their full, honest selves. And that's the invitation for all of us. Your calling is not something outside of you, waiting to be discovered in a place you haven't found yet. It's already inside of you. It's woven into who you are. The more you strip away the layers of pretense, the more you let go of the need to be anything other than who you were created to be, the closer you get to stepping into it fully. Because calling isn't about being impressive. It's about being real. It's about honoring what's inside of you instead of chasing what the world tells you should matter. It's about trusting that you were created with intention, and that the most powerful thing you can do is step into that design without fear. There will come a moment when everything in you wants to stop, when the weight of disappointment, fear, or exhaustion makes you question whether it's even worth it. When progress feels slow, when setbacks feel personal, when the dream that once burned bright now feels distant and impossible. And in those moments, the easiest choice is to quit, to retreat, to tell yourself that maybe this wasn't meant for you after all. But here's the truth: anything worth having will test you. Anything worth building will challenge you. And if you let difficulty convince you to stop, you'll never know what could have been on the other side of your perseverance. Moving forward isn't about never struggling. It's about refusing to let the struggle define you. It's about recognizing that growth often comes wrapped in discomfort, that progress is messy, and that sometimes the only thing you can do is take one small step at a time. The hard moments are where most people stop. The frustration, the rejection, the obstacles, this is where people give up on their dreams, their purpose, and even themselves. Because when things don't happen as quickly as we want them to, we assume they're not happening at all. When doors don't open right away, we convince ourselves they never will. When we experience failure, we take it as proof that we weren't meant for this. But none of that is true. Obstacles are not signs to turn back. They are part of the process. Resistance isn't proof that you're on the wrong path. It's proof that you're stretching beyond what is comfortable, stepping into something bigger than what you've known before. And that's hard. That's why most people don't do it. But the people who refuse to quit, the ones who keep going when everything in them wants to stop, they're the ones who eventually see the breakthrough. Think about all the times you've been through something difficult before, the moments you thought you wouldn't make it through, the challenges that felt impossible at the time. Yet here you are, stronger, wiser, more resilient. You didn't stop then, and you don't have to stop now. The truth is, no one is exempt from struggle. Even the most successful, most impactful, most purpose-driven people have faced moments where quitting seemed like the best option. The difference is they didn't let the hard parts define the whole journey. They kept showing up. They kept taking steps, even when those steps felt small, even when progress felt invisible. Because forward is forward, no matter how slow it feels. We tend to think that momentum only counts when it's big, when it's fast, when it's noticeable. But real progress happens in the tiny, consistent choices, the decision to try again after failure, the discipline to keep showing up when motivation fades, the willingness to believe in something even when it hasn't fully materialized yet. And maybe that's what faith really is, moving forward even when you don't have all the answers. Trusting that even when the road is difficult, it's leading somewhere worth going. Knowing that hard seasons don't last forever, but the strength you build in them does. Because sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is simply keep going. Life is full of uncertainty, challenges, and moments that test our faith. It's tempting to stay in our comfort zones, to let fear dictate our choices, to believe that our past limits our future. But the truth is, we were never meant to stay stuck. We were never meant to live small lives dictated by fear, doubt, or the need for control.